Now the name Colepaugh, to my understanding, is originally it was German and it's spelled Kohlbach, so Kohlbach. And at one point, his German family, ancestors of mine, were supposedly made to leave Germany, and they were told that they could stay there and lose everything, or they could be sold by the British to populate America. So this
How far back do you think this was?
1700s. So Andreas Kohlbach said, "Kids, we're going to America." So they were transferred to Ireland, where probably an Irish cleric took down the name. So next name, Andreas Kohlbach. How do you spell that? I don't know. So he wrote down C-O-L-E, Old King Cole, and P-A-U-G-H.
A lot of that happened back then.
So they were,
Yes,
so Andreas Kohlbach and family came to Red Hook, New York. And so Ellis Island and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, his grandson, George Colepaugh, who was born an American, came to New Brunswick in 1827, 2 years after the Miramichi fire for some reason. Fell in with an Irish girl, a Donovan, off the boats, and they ended up getting married. And a few years after that, he was up at the mouth of Zabby's River working for the Underhills, and he was into the store, the company store, and says, "I got a job with your boss. I'd like you to put my name down in the due book." And the due book was a ledger that his wife and family could have access to the store and whatever was in the store, and he wouldn't have to pay anything. Nothing would be due until the logs came down in the spring.
So it was a ledger.
Yeah, and they call it the due book. You pay what's due in the spring when you get paid. So he said, "All right, very best." He says, "What's your name?" He says, "George Colepaugh." He says, "How do you spell that?" He says, "I don't know." So he wrote down Coldpaw, Mr. Colepaugh. And then his son Tom got some education somewhere along the line, found some paperwork, and they went back to the Irish way of spelling the name. So Colepaugh has been ever since, not Cohlbach.
So I'm here with Bernie Colepaugh,
Colepaugh, that's it.
and well known in Miramichi area, especially in Renous, and has led quite an interesting life and has a great mind, great memory. So we're going to try and find out what he wants to just tell himself and his family or their larger Miramichi community, whatever he chooses. So when do you want to say when you were born, or just not?
Well, I'm going to be 70 in 2 days, so that's, August 6th, 1953. August 6th, me and Lucille Ball in Hiroshima, all August 6th. So,
Large family?
7 of us, 7 kids.
Normal.
I'm in the middle.
Yeah, okay.
So, got it both ways, but no, good family.
Where did you
good
go?
brothers
Where
and
did
sisters.
you grow up?
In Renous.
Yeah.
Went to school in a little Renous school for 5 years, and then Blackwell, and graduated out of Blackwell. Went to St. Thomas for 1 year, and decided that wasn't the life for me. So I started hitchhiking around and going out west for a while, and just kind of living. And
What would be the years that you would have went out west?
well, my next door neighbor and I, Brad Donovan, we hitchhiked together in the summer of '71 after we had graduated, and we hitchhiked out. We had, I think, $36 between us. I had 20, I think, and he had maybe a little more, something like that. It was around that. It wasn't very much. So I ran out of money in Alberta. He made it to Vancouver with his money, and then we made it all the way back with no money. So we panhandled, and well, we weren't big boys to start with, and we were even thinner when we got back. But we were gone, I think it was 33 days. So
More of a
an adventure.
Yeah.
And at that time, they said that in that summer of 1971, at any given moment, there was 10,000 kids hitchhiking on the road.
Well, back then it was very common, and it was relatively safe for
I met,
two guys anyway.
well, I met girls that were hitchhiking, never alone, but in couples, and I saw that many times. So yeah, so I went out there for the better part and stayed and worked. And
Early '70s were an interesting time for Canada. I think Trudeau came
Trudeau
in
years.
'68, and it was called Trudeau-mania.
Yep.
It was like a rock star, and it's hard for us to even imagine that about a politician. And but that's the way it was. He was
That's right.
people following him around. They were screaming autographs and all this stuff, and he came in almost as a new age fella, the same as Kennedy came in.
Celebrity, exactly.
Same as
Yeah.
Kennedy came in the U.S. A breath of fresh air. That was the hope at the time.
Yeah.
And then he did pretty good, but then the oil crisis hit, and oil went up tenfold in 10 years, and really rocked most economies in manufacturing, including a lot of the Miramichi who struggled in the 70s because of energy. Anyway,
Yeah.
so in the 70s, as I remember them, jobs were not easy to come by. So when you come back from hitchhiking, what did you do?
Well, I got to like some of the West Coast lifestyle. I lived in the mountains for a little bit, a place called Spokane, and hair down to here and whatnot. So when I came back, I wanted to live in the woods, old hippie type of thing, and so I did. I managed to get a piece of land that my brother gave me, and back into the woods and carried water and kerosene lamps and all that good
Back
stuff.
to the nature kind of trip?
Exactly. Put it in a garden, started foraging and doing all that stuff, which I still do. You can see books there on wild foods and cooking and things like this. So I like doing that. So, and like you say, there was not much work.
No.
And I didn't have a lot of skills, but I knew a lot of guys that worked in the woods, so they decided to take me on. And so I worked in the woods most of my life after that. And never regretted it. It was, it was honest work. It was good work. It was solid. And I did okay and got me stamps every year and that type of thing. So, so that was good.
Were you a trucker, a pulp wood cutter, or like a chainsaw operator, or any of those things in the woods?
Trail cutter most of the time, and
Yeah.
then I switched over later on when they got some mechanized that trail cutting and was going out. Me and my friends, we all shifted over to spacing saws.
Right.
So for the last bunch of years that I worked in the woods, I did the spacing saws.
So the spacing saws would have been in what decade there?
It would have been the early 90s, I guess.
Okay.
So I did that for quite a few years.
For repap?
Not directly, no. We did get some work through a repap, but most of it went through the woodlot office, which was government, and it was private woodlots, most of it. But we did get some through the mills, a little bit. Every year there'd be a certain amount.
And like you say, back then it was enough to do, work for seasonal work and get your unemployment stamps, and you could, carry yourself over for the winter.
Right.
A lot of work back then was seasonal.
Yes, exactly.
Especially resource work people.
Yeah.
And still is.
Woodcutters, fishermen,
Absolutely.
that type of
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what kind of things did you see, maybe starting back in the 70s, that were interesting stories?
Well, hitchhiking across the country, the number of times that I did, I was out there 5 times over the years. And from 73 to 78, I'm back and forth every year. And at that time, you could, I could get on the train in Newcastle and take it right into Vancouver and it cost $96. 4.5 days.
That's a good deal.
So, yeah. So I met very many interesting people on the trains. Hitchhiking, I went and stuck my thumb out here in the corner of Renous and got a first drive to Toronto. And one of the times I hitchhiked across the country, I did it in 6 days. Well, actually it was 9, but I spent 3 days with some friends in Calgary. So hitchhiking straight time, 6 days to go from here to Vancouver. So
That's hard to do.
that was pretty good. That was really good.
If you
4.5 days on the train.
Yeah,
So I did it in 6.
6 days is hard to do.
Sleeping in cars.
If you had your own car, driving 12 hours a day, you know, it's that big of a country, right? When you're out west, was the economy better than, like, you know, in New Brunswick, or was it the same, you know, resource based, seasonal based? What did you experience out there?
Well, I mean, I had odd jobs working for, you know, as a short order cook. I worked as a shoe stock boy. I mean, I worked at a mill in Spokane. I just odd job. Really, it was more about getting the heck out of Dodge. You know, it was more about leaving the Miramichi, where, I mean, I did not look at being from here as anything special at all. So I just wanted to experience some of the rest of the world was like, and everybody was going out west in those days.
That's true.
So I did. But after 5 years, I realized that it was no better there, for me personally, than it was. I mean, there may have been more job opportunities, especially in the cities, but I really started missing the Miramichi. So, like I said, I came back and built a cabin in the woods and lived in that for a few years. And anyway, met a nice girl from Montreal, and we ended up getting married and having kids, and we lived in Renous, and we bought this house and moved it here, and that was quite the experience itself.
This house wasn't built here.
No, this house was originally built by Father Murdoch, the priest that built that blessed the Dungarvan Hooper's grave. That priest had it built for nuns. So this was originally meant as a mini convent in Renous. But for whatever reason, the nuns never came here, and the station agents lived in it for many years. And because they were really close with the church in Renous was right, you know, from here to the road from the railway station. And then when the railway station shut down, there was other people who lived in it, and he was a forest ranger in Renous, and then he died, and his kids were all grown up. His wife lived to be quite old. She was a great friend of mine. I used to go by her house, and she said, Bernard, come on in. And she said, have something to eat. And I said, I'm not really hungry, Francis. Oh, come on. It's either you or the birds. So come on and eat. So I said, all right. And it was just have a cup of tea. And so it was just to give her company. And she was a very nice lady. And when she died, her children offered the house to me if I wanted it, because they did not. She had left it in the will I'm getting ahead of myself. When she died, they offered it to me to live in, which I did for years, right beside the church in Renous. And then when she went to a home, and then after she died, the house went to the church, and one of the parish council came to me one day, and he said, Bernie, would you be interested in buying this house from the church? I said, well, I'm assuming I'll have to move the house. And he said, yes. I said, well, I wouldn't be willing to pay very much if I have to move it. And he said, right. He said, well, how much would you pay? And I said, well, $5,000 to buy the house.
Which wasn't, you know, insignificant money back then either, though.
Well, it was, let me think, the year that would have been, we moved it here we moved it up here in 1889. So that's 34 years ago. So $5,000 wasn't a huge amount of money. So anyway, a few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from the Diocese of St. John, and if you want to buy the house for $5,000, you can, but you have to move it and fill in the hole. So I said, all right. So we bought this land here, my neighbors and I. We bought 150 acres here for $10,000.
Around the Renous River.
I do have a little bit of riverfront, just not much, but there is. It's shaped like that, so it's a lot bigger at the back than it is around the corner here, right?
Okay.
So it's a lot narrower at the front and wide at the back.
That's quite a piece of size of land.
Yep. So the neighbors had 100, and Joanne and I got 50. Brad and Hazel got 100, and so that's the way it went. So by the time I had bought the land, got the work done, cleared it, moved the house, power brought in, water, everything's $35,000. So that's not bad for a property and a house.
No?
And a
For
basement.
the whole shop?
And a full basement, full basement.
No, that's not bad.
Not bad at all, no.
So that's how that went.
That's how come I'm here, and I like it here.
Well, what's not to like?
Well, I'll be in this greenhouse with some of the boys. I say, boys, listen. What do you hear? Nothing.
Exactly.
I like it.
There's, I live in the highway in Blackville, and the traffic there is just, sometimes it's very trying, put it that way.
Well, I'm really hoping for a speedy fix of this.
The bridge?
The bridge up here, they used to call it the Red Bridge, the Bailey Bridge. And when they shut that down, the traffic here increased 100-fold. And the traffic now is just...
Because instead of going across the bridge, they gotta go around.
So it's supposed to open up, I'm not sure when the date, they said the fall, so that's not too far off. So,
Originally, when it was condemned, I guess, the province said, no, we're not gonna replace that, and then the citizens did such a protest
Yes, yeah.
that the government had to change their heart and said, okay, well, we'll put in a new bridge. Now, how many people are on this road? 1,000, 5,000, like?
On this road?
Yeah? No?
No.
Oh,
No, there's two houses at the beginning of the road, and one guy lives in one house, and a man and his wife live in the other. And there's I live here, and my friends, the two of them live there. So that's it for the first 5-6 miles. Then you get into Pineville, there wouldn't be 100 people there. There might be 100 people on this whole road.
and you go far enough down, then you can connect to
The Lockstead Road takes you to
Black
Black
State Road, right? And I'm not far from that road.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What stories do you have?
Well, I'm wondering where it started. One of the things that I did that I was really proud of over the last 20 years or so, because it was very boring working in the woods, okay? And all you hear is that saw and the voice in your head. So I was getting a little tired of listening to myself all the time, and I knew that there was a poem called A Winter on Renous, and it mentions the old woodsman's place up the Plaster Rock Highway, the Colepaugh place, the Woodsman's Inn. And my great-great-grandfather started a Woodsman's Inn up there, and I think he bought the camp. He was hired at first, and then when the contractors moved out, he took it over, and we think it might have been Snowball. Jabez Bunting Snowball. He was a big...
Around 1900 or when?
No, 18s. It would have been... No, mid-1800s. George Colepaugh came here in 1827. Turned Catholic in 1845. Would have been up there maybe the 18... My grandfather was born there in 1890.
Okay.
He wasn't the oldest, so it was the mid to late 1800s. We don't have very much documentation.
Yeah.
But there was this poem called A Winter on Renous by Joe Smith, the poet of Dungarvan. And 2 miles further at Tom Colepaugh's, we had another, as we sat jolly smoking upon the Devil's Back, and 2 miles further at Tom Colepaugh's, we had another snack. So I said, oh, look at that. It mentions my family name in it, right? I thought, well, that's kind of cool.
Right.
So I started writing, I wrote out the poem, thanks to Louise Manny's book, Songs of Miramichi.
What a book.
What a book.
Jeepers creepers.
And there's more information in the little notes. There's a wealth of information in the notes that her and Reginald Wilson wrote. There's a lot of stuff in that. So anyway, I started learning a verse at a time, and after a while I knew the whole poem. And then I found out there was a poem written by Hedley Parker, who was in Newcastle for many years, originally from Millerton, but lived in Newcastle around Ritchie Wharf,
Okay.
around the boats all the time. He went on to become the marine editor for the New York Sun in New York, and came back and forth a lot. In 1902, he wrote a poem called The Days of Duffy Gillis. And anybody that would know anything about that would be the one line, The Days of Duffy Gillis on the Sow Wow West. Just the way he said it. So I'm getting more of an interest in all this folk poetry and folk stories. And then it mentions, so Duffy Gillis came here in the 1700s, and he was my mother's father's father's father, 6, 7 generations, whatever it is. And what it talks about his day. It doesn't mention him too much, just his name. It doesn't talk about him, but just what was going on in his day. And then half of the poem is about a night at the old Colepaugh place. And they would, Saturday night, and they'd sit around the fire, birch logs blazing bright, and after a while somebody put out a fiddle, and then somebody'd pass a jug, and they'd start dancing, and they'd...
It's a Miramichi ways.
Yeah, so this was great. So the hearth at Colepaugh's is mentioned a couple of times. So this is a Saturday night at the Colepaugh place back in the 1800s. So Days of Duffy Gillis, the Colepaugh place, and my father, Danny Colepaugh, married my mother, Carmel Gillis, that became my siblings' poem, because it's about both sides of our family. You know what I mean? We kind of...
How rare is that for a family to have that?
Hello?
I never heard that before. They have both sides.
Yeah, I know. So that was really great. So I got kind of excited, and I started looking into more, and then I found 2 more poems. The Maid of Miramichi by Michael Whalen. Cease Your Crew Crying for Colepaughs, because the Days of Duffy Gillis was written about bemoaning the loss of all the things that were happening in those days. And after the Confederation in 1867, things went downhill for New Brunswick, and it is true that did happen. But Michael Whalen took it upon himself to kind of refute Hedley Parker's poem. And so, where Parker was bemoaning the loss of the hearth at Colepaugh's with its welcome warm and true, Michael Whalen was saying, well, cease your crew crying for Colepaugh's, because there's lots of good things that have happened since then. And he mentions all the good things, the Steel Bridge in Blackville, and Snowball, and all these other people that were doing a lot of things. So there was that one, and then there was another one. I have no idea, I came across it, but it was by C.H. Morris, Morris, and I have no idea who he is, and I don't even remember where I got the poem. Somebody gave it to me, and it mentions Colepaugh's and that. So there's at least 4 poems that mention Colepaugh in it.
There's a Morris, the last name is Morris, who's a teacher, vice principal, maybe principal at the end of Jameson, at the end of his career as a teacher at Jameson Hill, MORRIS.
Yeah, so it was a night at Big George Hayes's, and so that's a place in Renous, Big George Hayes, mentioned, kind of going full circle, this poem about a winter on Renous, the sons of Morgan Hayes, Eddie, George, and Mike. So whoever C.H. Morris was, I don't know, but he used to be in Renous. So whether he was just an itinerant worker that worked for Hayes's, because Hayes's did work in the woods. They had no mercy on a man but worked him day and night. The sons of Morgan Hayes, Eddie, George, and Mike. So he might have been just